Okay. And that gets us down to B. It's the Old Town Projects Community Workshop Summary. Do we have a staff report on that?
Yes, we do. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Kildee. We're going to have somewhat of a team approach in presenting this item for you this evening. We're going to start with David Goodell, the consulting architect that's been hired to help facilitate the public outreach and creation of design alternatives for these properties. And following his presentation, which will be an overview of the prior community workshops, we'll then have Bob Burrow, planner with Charles Abbott and Associates, present a summary of the agenda report, and then I'll conclude with staff recommendation. So for now, I'd like to turn it over to our consulting architect, Mr. David Goodell.
Good evening, Mayor Kildee, council members. Is there possibly a that would be great. Thank you. So we held 2 workshops, one on the courthouse property in late January and one on Disdar Park in late May. They were both very rich in public input, and there's a lot of data. I'm going to attempt to give you a precise or a concise summary of that data in the next series of images. So the first workshop, January 29th, on the courthouse property, which included both the old courthouse, the farmers market parking lot, and the district property to the south of the courthouse. There was a robust public outreach prior to that included website page, flyers, mailers, and a posted sign, and that resulted in a participation of about 59 community participants who formed 9 small breakout groups. And this is an image from that. It was done at the Camarillo Library in their multi-purpose room. I want to stress that both of these workshops were exclusively about program. They were not about design in the sense of where things should go or how things should be organized, but simply what are the uses that we should look at for these 2 sites. For the courthouse, there were a number of ground rules. First, the property management plan established that the courthouse could only be a public use, and it really is currently slated to be demolished. The farmers market needs to be retained, and the space also needs to be available for other community events such as the major festival every year. The public parking needs to be retained, and that's another constraint. And then along with that, the field, even though it can be used for new programs, it may in the future need to revert back to the school district, and so whatever happens there needs to be a flexible kind of use of that site. Finally, the design, as it begins to develop, needs to conform to the Ventura Boulevard design guidelines, and I think at best we'll actually weave those guidelines into the property and its design. Some very brief statistics. There's 1.1 acres on the lower site and 12,000 square feet for the courthouse. So that will basically add a substantial amount to the total site. And then the upper acreage is about 3¼ acres for about a little over 4¼ acres for the total site. One of the things that we see from the upper site, if we walk around on that site, once the courthouse is gone, underneath the ficus trees, there's a really fabulous panoramic view of the mountain range once that building is gone. So we then ponied through a series of teasers, if you will, for potential program uses. And we'll do that very briefly here. Each of these slides were separated in the workshop, but suggested potentials included bocce ball, chess park, picnic, sitting garden, a place where organized Tai Chi, yoga, aerobics, Qigong could happen, water play, a walk and jog network, art park in collaboration with Channel Island Studios, just simply a lawn relaxation place, a place for circuit training, casual lawn sport, and then all of the supportive uses that might go with increased public use, bike parking, trash, casual sitting. And with the farmers market, we know we have a requirement for a restroom provision. So a summary of the group breakout. There were 9 tables that were formed, and each table came up with a number of things. They came up with sort of top priorities, with guiding principles, and with likes, dislikes, and what we might call keepers relative to the park space or the courthouse property space. And I'm going to kind of use another slide to summarize the priorities. This does it here by table and then totals them on the left, but I think there's a better diagram of that as we reach to that point. This slide basically looked at the breakdown of participants. There were a number of Playhouse participants at a couple of tables. The preponderance of participants were simply residents or unidentified. There were some working visitors, some Chamber of Commerce and business owners, the school district, and farmers market and Studio Channels Island. So a good cross-section of the community was there, especially those related to that central area.
How many were there?
59. So there was a pretty unanimous sense of what was liked, disliked, and what should be kept. Likes included the central location, the farmers market being there, convenient parking, and the influence of Channel Islands on the site, the art studios. Dislikes were also shared. I think the idea that it's congested at sometimes, like Farmers Market Day, and then is completely empty on other days, is not well liked. The sense that it's a little inefficient and dysfunctional, it's aesthetically not entirely sightly. There's poor access to the upper site, not just for the disabled, but for anybody. And then there's the interrupted bike path where the alley basically ends at the courthouse, and a kind of absence of character. The keepers about the site were definitely the line of ficus trees and the grass field, the farmer's market, and the visual openness of the whole site. Then there were a lot of individual ideas from both the breakout groups and from emails, and I think rather than dig down into these, I would say that most of these had to do with design once we have decided upon program, and we may not need to delve into like things like how it should be fenced or not fenced are really more design issues than program issues. Some major guiding principles that, again, everyone agreed on is that the solution should activate the site with increased pedestrian traffic, and it should support Old Town. That the site should be well interconnected between Old Town, Channel Island Studios, and the upper and lower site, both aesthetically and in terms of pedestrian flow. That it should have a universal appeal in terms of age, in terms of day and night, indoor, outdoor, and small and large group potentials. that it should form a more welcoming environment, and the design should consider the residential neighbors who are very close by, especially relative to acoustics. And then it should be enhanced in terms of the aesthetics of the surface parking, especially, so it's not just a parking lot. And that the whole project, if it should come to fruition, should benefit and strengthen Old Town and the city. So this is the graphic that we may, again, maybe towards the end of this presentation, ask for some help on, because this is literally now where we're talking about the preferences for program uses. And the bars would indicate, for instance, 4 tables favored a walking and art gardens in collaboration with Channel Island Studios. 4 tables supported a casual, active park. I want to say that none of these are necessarily exclusive, that they could be complementary uses. 4 tables favored a small amphitheater and pagoda, some form of performance. And 4 tables supported this is significant, a performing arts or a cultural center that would actually be a bricks and mortar facility. 3 votes is sort of the next tier, and again, this first one is almost complementary to the first one above, but the idea of a small garden venue, sort of like a poetry garden or a place for a small classical music performance, a little different than the pagoda idea, but similar in concept. And then 3 suggested that farmers market needs to be significantly enhanced. And 3 tables favored expanded parking. 2 of those tables favored a parking structure. Now, I should note on the left-hand side are those that tables that actually said we should not have something. So you'll see opposite Performing Arts Center, there was 1 table that said no, Performing Arts Center, and 1 table that said no to parking. There were 2 for picnic area and 2 tables for splash pad, 1 no on that, and then 2 for sports courts. And then some individual table ideas supplemented those.
And how many tables were there?
9.
9, thank you.
And these, again, are email kind of concepts for use, and they occurred from January 16th all the way to just about a week ago. And again, the preponderance of votes, there were sort of 5 for a casually active park, and a mention of Daiichi and an art park within that. And then second was intimate pagoda amphitheater and enhancing farmers market. And again, expanded parking was fairly big. And then maybe leaping down to the next 2 vote, we had retail or residential infill. And then a 3 vote for, again, a special garden, whether it's a sensory garden or a drought-tolerant kind of demonstration garden. I should say about parking that this was a theme at both workshops, and just as an observer, it appeared to me that this was more an Old Town concern than one that related to we need parking right at this location. So that was a summary of the courthouse property. I should maybe pause and ask if there are any clarifying questions about what happened at that workshop.
Any questions?
Okay.
No? Proceed.
Good. Disdar Park, then again, was May 20th, 2019. And when we began this process, we had as the site for Disdar, the existing Disdar Park, plus the abandoned fire station and its yard to the south. And right the day of, or the day before the workshop, we learned that the lease of the Chamber of Commerce building would not continue. So that became a point of discussion at the workshop, although it was a rather unrehearsed point of discussion, and the responses to it were quite quick because there was no time to think about it. A very similar level of public outreach occurred for DISDAR. However, for whatever reasons, the actual turnout here was quite smaller, less than half. It was 26 participants, and those participants formed 4 small breakout sessions. We began looking at some of the existing uses, the tot lot area, the small, very individual kind of family, small picnic venues, and the open lawn area, and then spoke to the major uses of the Camarillo Festival Fiesta and the winter tree lighting. And we reviewed briefly the 2012 Newman and Associates design with the fire station adapted to a restaurant use, and all of the other parts of that design, the band shell, the parking, the expanded tot lot area. And then a lot of time passed, and a number of political and other events happened, economic events happened. But the outcome was that basically uses for the fire station all seemed to fall short of having a successful economic pro forma. At the same time, the building may be eligible for historic status. So we don't have a very forceful grip on precisely what can be done or what should be done with the fire station at this moment. One of the observations about the park that's rather interesting, and the Chamber building certainly doesn't make it easier, is that as people are traveling from west to east on Ventura Boulevard, if you miss the park, you're in a bit of trouble in terms of getting back. And it's a great greeter as you get off of the freeway, but if you're traveling east and you don't know the city, it can be a rather difficult return. One of the great things about this park is its really mature trees and the variety of trees, and of course the Adolfo Camarillo equestrian statue at the front near Ventura. So the Chamber site is about 0.15 acres. The fire station is 0.65 acres, and the park itself currently is about 1 acre. So the whole site will become about a 1.8 acre site. Again, we went through programs. Some of them are quite similar to what we did for the property at the courthouse, but these are unique, and it was the proposal or idea that we would have an expanded tot lot, a compact adult apparatus exercise area, a band shell of some kind, an expanded area where food trucks could park on fiesta or other event days. And then again, we repeated bocce ball, chess park, picnic, a lounging garden, a place for mild physical sport, water play, casual lawn sport, and court sports. And again, the same support uses as we talked about at the courthouse property. So again, we had 4 tables and some fairly focused priorities developed, and again, we'll get to those in the summary slide. Here we had a mix of Old Town residents, larger Camarillo residents, school district people, and Old Town merchants, and a small quantity of studio channel islands. Likes about the site, again, likes and dislikes were fairly unanimous. that the mature trees, the equestrian statue, the green space, the historic ambience of the park, which I think includes the fire station, the location and its fiesta events. Dislikes included the traffic surrounding the site, some concerns about safety and lighting, the disuse of the fire station, the number of vagrants who apparently use the park, limited wheelchair access currently, lack of restrooms, the way the park can get quickly crowded, parking concerns. Again, this was a global concern. The existing playground location, and again, that it's easy to miss and hard to get back. Keepers for the park included the trees, the green space, and the equestrian statue. There were, I think it's important to say, there was a wide diversity of responses about the continued value of both the chamber building and the fire station, and a lot of suggestions that, especially with the fire station, that some portion of it, a facade, a portion of the volume could be somehow adaptively reused and basically used to help express the historic character of the park. Again, a lot of one-off ideas that I think are more about design and concepts as we move forward than program uses. And then a summary of the guiding principles, that the park's character should be conserved, its mature trees, statue, and green space especially. That the park's safety and accessibility should be improved, that the park's iconic location as an entryway to Old Town should really be celebrated with its sight lines and lighting and other means. And I think this was important to a number of the tables, that there's a real opportunity at this park to be a gateway to Old Town. That the competing parking demands of merchants, residents, and the park seem to be on a lot of people's minds. That the uses of the park should be primarily passive and sort of appropriate for its size, capacity, and the Old Town adjacency. That it should not be, for example, an active sports park. And then that the vacated buildings should be resolved in a way that benefit the park's use and its character. So major preferences here. 3 tables favored the idea of a sitting garden, and each of those 3 favored the idea of a fountain along with that sitting garden. 3 tables favored the idea of a I'm sorry, when I say 3 tables, several tables voted for more than one priority. So you'll see, though there were 4 tables here, what we're basically listing are the number of priorities that were addressed. So a performance venue in the form of a band shell or something like a splash pad, there were 2 for that. On-site parking increased, there were 2 for that. Exercise area 2, restrooms 2, and then the remainder were kind of one-off priorities. Actually, the last 3, expanded tot lot, botanical garden, and parking structure, were really programmed. Everything else below was really kind of support or general priorities, like more food truck support, a trolley for Old Town, appropriate barriers, especially I think relative to children running out to Ventura or to the side. And the park as an iconic gateway, passive use, and then many ideas about the building's demolition or preservation. Very few email comments came in. Outdoor performance, expanded playground, and And of course, to complement the courthouse so that we don't duplicate either management or uses with the courthouse. These images basically applied to both parks, but they were supplied by community members as prototypes for things like permeable paving, amphitheaters, splash pads, and expanded tot lot areas. And the Liberty Public Market in San Diego was sort of referenced relative to the courthouse. So that basically is a summary, and we have put up here, if it's useful for you, kind of the charting of what was favored at each site in terms of the numbers of priorities that were listed. So these were shown earlier, but again, we're leaving them there for possible discussion. So that is a summary of the workshops. And Bob Burrow is going to speak for a moment relative to some of the reality, both legally and otherwise, of some of the program ideas that came up at the workshops.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been asked to speak briefly about this overall project, and clearly the city's used visioning tools and techniques and groups and so forth to come up with many of the great plans that have been developed over the years. As you can see, that David's pointed out that there was a lot of consensus between some of the major ideas that the different individuals and tables came to consensus on. And both in terms of those things that they liked, those things that they wanted to see improved, and then the ideas that you get to be able to kind of walk through with him as well. But what I wanted to do was to share with you, before we get in the next phase, some of the various constraints that affect the overall development of the plans and alternatives. In addition to the direction that you will be providing this evening, moving forward in coming up with schematics for the various alternatives, just remember, as David's pointed out, that these areas are within the Old Town Design Guidelines, and there's a lot of good information that was developed, again, through a process like this for various design elements and components. And the city's general plan and zoning also affect the types of uses and the development standards that need to be considered in that. The property management plan, as David noted, does call for the continued use of the sites for public purpose, and that's been approved locally and through the state. There are also certain agreements that are in place, particularly with regard to Disdar Park. When the city acquired the property from the Parks District, there was an agreement that it be retained for parks use. It has a long history of being park area within the community, one of the first parks, and there's been a lot of discussion about that. But its sole purpose it has been historically for park, and there is the agreement in place for that. And again, to remind you that the Courthouse property, the city owns both the Disdar property, the fire station, and the Courthouse property. But the southerly area of the study area involves the green playfields of the former Pleasant Valley Elementary School District. That is owned by the Pleasant Valley School District, and of course they're going to have a lot to say with regard to that. Thus far, there seems to be interest in participating with the city, but some limitations as to the kind of types of permanent improvements for that. And the school district has a lease with Studio Channel Islands, and of course, nothing can go in there that would be contrary to that lease without going through discussion and any modifications to that. It was also brought up that the Community Development Department has had a historical reconnaissance report done on the former fire station building, and the conclusion of that was that the site may be eligible for either local, state, or federal historic status. And what that means is that as this goes forward, if there were to be, as part of the development of plans, substantial remodeling of the building or demolition of the building, it would most likely first require a focused environmental impact report and talking about mitigation measures for that. And ultimately, that if the decision were to remove it, statements of overriding consideration would have to be prepared as well in support of that decision. Another concern, of course, always is budget and the fact that there's, not an unlimited budget, but that would be budget that would be necessary for the capital improvements, the overall operation, and not necessarily just in terms of improvements, but staffing and other kinds of aspects, but also for the ongoing maintenance of the properties, and budgets would have to be prepared for that. In addition to, finally, some of the other aspects, David noted accessibility requirements and, of course, grading, drainage, building codes, and so forth. And that other things is this is a process, and things are going to come up through that process. But the city did acquire the sites as part of the redevelopment project area, and the city was able to hang on to those sites through the post-redevelopment era. And when the city acquired these sites, it was initially to facilitate and to help come up with plans for the improvement of these areas, just like the city has done with the streetscape areas, dilapidated structures and buildings and other properties within the overall area. So this is an opportunity to move forward. There have been ideas proposed and work done to come up with ideas for these properties, but none of them have come to fruition yet. So as you can see, this is an exciting process to take this to the next step. And as you see in your staff report, staff is soliciting direction from the council this evening so that the architect can go to the drawing table and start coming up with ideas to be presented. Both of the properties are going to be merged into the next workshop, and with the idea there is that uses wouldn't be duplicated between the two, and that they can be presented in a uniform, combined approach to these Old Town properties.
Thank you very much, Bob. So I want to just highlight that we did provide a significant amount of public outreach and provided ample advertisement of the workshops, and we really do appreciate those citizens, business owners, and community members that did participate and actively engaged in the discussion. It was a lively experience, definitely on the courthouse reuse workshop, and then we also had very good discussion at the Disdar Park enhancement workshop. So I do want to thank those community members also that are here this evening. We did advertise tonight's meeting as well for the public with signs on the property, mailers, newspaper publications, our website, and all the additional resources we've been using for a very thorough public outreach campaign for these important properties. So we have gotten the word out. We've done our best to try to solicit as much participation as possible, and we think that we've achieved a significant amount of input. And tonight it is our recommendation that the City Council now, after having had an opportunity to receive an overview of the workshops, now provide your input so we can kind of focus the next steps as we design the alternative concepts on these properties to move forward into the design phase. So that's staff's recommendation, and of course, we're available for any questions.
Any questions at this time? Ms. Santangelo?
How specific do we have to be at this point?
You need to be generally specific. I think it'd be very helpful. The more specificity, it just gives us a little bit, I think, of sharper pencil to work things out. So honestly, all joking aside, I think it'd be really good if we can get some real direct input. And the input could be what you think is important based on what you've heard from the community, what's important based on what you've heard from people out in town. And you could also highlight what you don't think would work and what you think is inappropriate based on what you've heard. So, For example, we've heard that some community members would like a parking structure at Disdar Park. Well, we know that practically that can't happen because it has to be preserved for park space. Can we add some parking to supplement the use of the park? And if there was a bandstand, have a loading area? Yes, we could accommodate that. But we don't feel that a parking structure, for instance, would be reasonable because that's not a park use on that property. So we would like some specificity.
Mr. Mulchay?
Joe, just to clarify the process, the council is going to provide input this evening. We're going to go back out and do a combined community workshop for both these properties in one.
Yes, that's correct. So what we're going to do after the meeting this evening, we're going to actually prepare alternative design concepts to then go back out for another community workshop where we're addressing both properties at one meeting.
Is it anticipated this next community workshop, there will be actual visual references as to
Yes.
what these spaces could look like based on the input
Yes,
received?
so it won't be fully detailed design drawings, but there will be design concepts put together.
And then at what point because where the rubber meets the road is obviously money, and nothing's for free, but at what point do we start applying dollar figures to these different?
So that would come in the next phase. So we anticipate having another community workshop to look at alternative design concepts, then coming back in a similar format to the city council to share what the community expressed in regards to those alternative concepts. Then we're going to go back and formulate the real design concepts based on everyone's collaboration. And at that time, we'd be able to put together some anticipated costs.
Offhand, when it comes to costs, because I heard this echo, I attended both these community workshops, and I heard concern as to, well, what are the numbers? Because the general public has some concern as to what they want, what the price tag is that accompanies that. Is there a way to apply general when it comes to, say, just a passive? Of course, not nailed down specific features, but is there? I know there is on a per square foot basis, there is a general anticipated development cost for passive spaces, passive open spaces. Is there a possibility that we would be able to speak in those terms?
Just
or?
anecdotally, if you have open green space versus a parking structure, the cost ramifications are extremely different.
Oh, absolutely. I understand.
So
that.
we don't have any real numbers yet, but we will start to, we will start to formulate that as we progress.
But at this point, we do have, I'm going off my memory, we do have, I think, $3.5 million budgeted for the courthouse redevelopment and 1.3 for Disdar.
Yes, and those were just placeholders for now in the CIP, and we understood that there would potentially be the need to adjust that depending on what the outcome of this public outreach campaign
Okay.
presents.
Any other questions? I do have a blue card. Why don't we take the blue card first? Suzanne Springer is here. Suzanne? And
Thank you, Mayor,
yeah.
Council, David and Bob. My concern is very simply that the green grass and the old growth trees be preserved at all cost. We have such little of that left anymore in Old Town. And on this side of the freeway, we have these two areas and a teeny tiny little park at the top of Carmen. So this is important for me as an Old Town resident with grandchildren. I just became aware that there will be up July 2nd council meeting discussion about there's a little kind of abandoned parking area that would be right below Disdar Park, opposite Ventura Boulevard, that 8 apartments are going to go in, and they will have garages. But we Americans store so much stuff in our garages, I'm just a little afraid that those residents are going to be parking on the street, which is already pretty crowded when Mary Magdalene's school has an event and so on. I'm concerned for the business owners there on Glen that there's enough parking for people to be able to participate in the services offered there. So I think maybe the courthouse area would be the area, if we're trying to expand parking, would be a good place to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I do not have any other blue cards. Anybody else like to address this issue? Okay, so my recommendation is we split these up, that we actually talk about the courthouse first and Dizdar second, or we can reverse that. I think we ought to do courthouse first, and then we'll do Dizdar, if that's
Fine with me.
all right with everybody. Okay, so let's talk about the courthouse. Is there anything else you want to add, Joe, to your discussion about the courthouse? Or
No.
anybody else? Bob or anybody else? No? Okay. All right, so let's talk about the courthouse then.
Your Honor.
Who wants to, Charlotte, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought. This courthouse area we bought because we wanted to do something to bring people into Old Town. And it was going to have to be a government use. And we found a government agency that we thought was going to work in it, and then their plans changed when there was an election and their board members changed. And those board members wanted to have their, the VCTC central offices in Ventura and not here in Camarillo. So we looked at it, and the building just is going to cost too much to save, so we had to think of some other public use. And so the idea came up that it would be a what we called a passive recreation park. It was going to be something where people could have their lunch or go buy something in Old Town and go there and have a picnic. It was not going to be an active park. And then, all of a sudden, one council member who's no longer here got the great idea to throw in a whole lot more property all the way to the back of the school district property, all of the former school ground. And so now we're talking about taking the simple concept of something that was going to be a picnic area for passive recreation, strictly up in the courthouse and parking lot area, into something that is 4 acres. It has an amphitheater, a stage, a parking garage, tennis courts, and I forget what else all was up there, and a splash pad, and all that stuff that is not passive recreation. And I've expressed my concern before. I do support Dizdar Park. I think it needs to be upgraded a lot, but I don't think that the city needs 2 parks on Ventura Boulevard. I also think that we have to consider that we're getting way over into an area where we were not set up to be. I cannot support extending the park any distance past what we already own. This is the park area that would be at the courthouse site. And the reason I don't is because we are not a full-service city. We are and always have been a contract city. We're a city that was set up under different circumstances than full-service cities. We do not have a Department of Parks and Recreation, which means we do not have employees that take care of parks or who provide activities at those parks. We just don't have the staff to do that. There's a recreation and park district in this area. Its boundaries are much larger than the city in area. It serves many more people than the population of the city. It's older than the city, and it gets that portion of the property taxes that the county designates for park and recreation. We don't get those. We don't get money to provide recreation for people. So, the former courthouse area, I could support going back to what we started out to do, and that is to have a grassy picnic area with trees and picnic tables and that kind of thing. That would be very, very passive, and that would be at the west end of the property, and it would switch. The original proposal was to switch the courthouse area around, take up part of the parking lot, and then the parking would, the number of parking spaces would remain neutral. But I cannot support anything that would expand this park into the Pleasant Valley Recreation and the Pleasant Valley School District property.
Okay.
That's it.
Anybody else? Sean, do you want to?
Yeah, I will go.
We'll do the courthouse.
Yeah, Jay, I'll stick to just the courthouse. I'm gonna follow on the heels of Charlotte in some of her comments. I'm trying to balance two things primarily. One, the prudent financial use of taxpayer dollars. At this point, budget lists out $3.5 million, which is an absorbent amount of money. And the other half is doing something, well, actually there's three, doing something which would benefit the community as a whole and specifically help reinforce the economic vitality of Old Town Camarillo, which I think there's a general consensus that it's lacking, and it has been for quite some time. So I'm trying to weigh all three of these things. I have concerns, and I'm not particularly a fan of, as Charlotte said, expanding the park all the way back and encompassing the PVSD field. Part of that is because although PVSD owns that, and I know that at some point we would have to return that to them if they choose a different use for that property, I personally don't think they're going to, and this is me, I have no inside information or anything, but just looking at the economics of it, I don't think PVSD is going to be reactivating that school anytime soon with declining enrollment, with barring somehow that we approve another 4,000 or 5,000 homes somewhere in Camarillo that are going to bring new families and feed the need for a new school. I don't see that school being reactivated, and the cost to making that usable again as a school, I think is cost prohibitive for the park, for the school district. I see a greater opportunity in that whole space from the courthouse property all the way to the school as a real gem of an opportunity down, not at this point, but down the road when PVSD maybe ultimately makes a decision as to what they want to do with that property. And they may sell that to any host of potential buyers. I don't know what kind of limitations on that part of the property, something the city would not own, what limitations there would be there. But I don't necessarily want to sink a whole bunch of money into a property we don't own that at some point may get repossessed. I'll just use it, repossessed by the park or by the school district for some other potential use. And some other potential probably better use in many regards, particularly as it pertains to the economic vitality of Old Town. I can see a lot of better uses for that property than it currently exists. I'm talking about the school site right now, and so I'm hesitant to, like I said, put a whole bunch of money into that. I do want to make sure we preserve the current programming. The courthouse building, I've been inside it. We've all taken a tour of it. It's completely, it's unusable, and it's in pretty bad shape. No one's going to use it. You'd have to sink a lot of money into rehabbing that thing to make it usable and accessible, and I just don't see that happening. And as of this point, there has been no one to come forward willing to do that. So, I mean, I'm all for definitely knocking that building down and upon that part of land, trying to see what we can reprogram and use that space for. I think a passive park, again, echoing Charlotte's comments, I think something passive, it would be nice in the interim. I would love to keep the door open and communicating to the school district as to what they intend to do with their property. Because I think there is a very large redevelopment opportunity there, not to mention, while still incorporating Studio Channel Islands, while possibly bringing in additional shops, while then expanding potential park space or community space, potential venue space, something that's not necessarily disruptive to the adjacent homes, but something that the neighbors that are adjacent to that parcel can also go and enjoy. The parking, there's plenty of parking. I want to preserve the parking. What I feel like there's a, and I hear the complaints, and I frequent Old Town a lot. I probably eat down there, try to eat down there once a week, or I go for soft serve, or I go to Boulevard Burger and whatnot. And during the peak times, there is a parking issue. If you drive by there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday, there won't be, because that's not when people are frequenting that place. But in the, say, at the 5 o'clock to 8:30 session, when those businesses make their money, they make the bulk of it at those times, yeah, there is there's a parking issue. What funny thing is that although parking on the boulevard is all taken up, and I often have to walk 2-3 blocks to get where I'm going during peak times, which is really not that far of a walk. It's probably, go down to Ventura or go down to Santa Barbara, and you're walking a much greater distance to get to where you're going in those in their downtowns. But a lot of the parking in front of that courthouse is almost unused. There's this general perception of this lack of accessibility. Like, I can't really put my thumb on it, other than for some reason people think it's like off limits or it's not quite there. And I do feel that during those peak times it's underutilized. I think there is an opportunity to improve the utilization of that parking lot to help offset this quote-unquote parking issue and this perception of a parking issue that a lot of people have. But I'm looking at the $3.5 million we have budgeted for this project in its whole, and as Mr. Vaca said, depending upon how this all comes out, that number could definitely fluctuate. But that's just a significant amount of money invested in primarily land that we won't own. It's not to mention what kind of maintenance costs that comes with it as well. We have trees and we have grass and we have fountains, or we have whatever it is we could put there. It's all going to have to get maintained, and that we don't necessarily have a revenue item for offsetting those increased expenses. It's one thing the city has always been since the late 80s, and has been rather financially prudent, watching the dollars. So I don't want to lose sight of that. That's more or less all I have. I love attending the farmers market down there. I don't foresee any interruption in the farmers market and how they use that space. If anything, I think there's certain things where we can do to maybe possibly even enhance its usability through looking at this property. But to put a nail in it, I do have significant concerns about the property we're looking at in which the city does not own. I'm all fine in putting in a certain amount of money to improve the property we do have, particularly on the current courthouse site. But I would like to, like I said, I think there's a bigger picture here that we're missing, and I don't necessarily, when it comes to this property, I don't want to piecemeal this, because I think piecemealing it is only just going to pigeonhole us a little bit more, and it's going to become a lot more costly overall. So, and we are not a park district. We do have a park district, and they maintain parks, and they do a great job of that. I don't necessarily want to get us into that business.
Okay.
Those are my comments. Yeah, thank you.
Susan?
In an ideal world, I would love it if we could get that property from Pleasant Valley School District and take this whole area and redevelop it. I have been speaking to people unofficially and trying to find out what the possibility of that land coming available, and it's so complicated that it would never come to the city. It would just, it's so complex. And because of that, but I also don't think that school is ever going to be repurposed and utilized as a school. I think it's going to be some time that it kind of sits there. Thank you. And because of that, I see this area that is sitting there unused, that grass area. And so in my mind, as I've tried to envision what this area could be, I've always kept in the back of my head what is something that can still be enjoyed, but also not completely spend a whole lot of money to turn it into something that is more than really a lovely grass area that we can do something, maybe in partnership with Studio Channel Islands. And I say that because I went through all of these emails really carefully. There were so many mentions, and I was at both of the workshops about art installations and the community doing art projects together and things like that. So I could envision that back on that grass area, spiffing it up a little bit and do things that aren't permanent fixtures to make that area nicer, but not really spend a whole bunch of money in case that land does go away or away from us. I know that we're not a park and rec, but I see that part of town. It's like the heart of Old Town to me, and it just seems like it's screaming out for it to be a driver to bring people, to bring family, to be a destination to Old Town. When I think about Old Town right now, the only reason I go to Old Town is for a specific business, not really to go and hang out or spend time or, go have a picnic or go see some kids perform at a small amphitheater. I'm just throwing ideas out of it being a destination, of a pull. So you go down there for an activity and you walk down the street and you stop to eat or you stop for ice cream or for coffee and help invigorate the businesses there. So I'm reluctant to just settle for it being just a passive park. But I also understand that we are not. So I too am trying to balance what we do with this. It's ours, and we have to do something with it, and it has to be public use. As far as the parking, and I think the thing that there's something about that parking lot being right there on Ventura Boulevard that to me is just an eyesore. I think Old Town is just lovely, but when you come out to that area, it's like just asphalt. And in my vision, I see it as something really welcoming and beautiful and more in character and in line with the beauty of our city, something that's inviting. And it may just be a beautiful park with some art and some more semi-permanent fixtures for the farmer's market, or, a small, maybe steps up to where the courthouse is, to the line of trees, so you can sit up there and look out over the city, over to the mountains. So I think we can still do something with it without making it super high maintenance and without pouring a whole lot of money into something permanent that might not be able to be there forever.
Can I just ask if you're talking about the small area or the whole expanded area?
Just from the trees up. But no, I'm sorry,
All
no.
the way to the back?
The back part, I was thinking just a place for, like I said, like walking paths, where there could be art fixtures or things that can be there temporarily.
Anything else?
That's all I have.
Okay, well, I think we've had a really good discussion here on this. I want to make just a couple of comments. I think where the old courthouse, I see that as an underutilized part of that area. And what's been talked about, too, with the school district, they've got to follow education code. And education code is pretty significant about what they can do with their properties if they decide to sell it, and what they could put that money into. So my research has told me that, for instance, if they were to sell that, they couldn't put that into increasing teacher salaries. It's got to be in another school. It's got to be in a maintenance or something like that. Ed Code apparently is pretty significant and pretty accurate on that. So whether they're ever going to need it for another school, who knows? But they do have Studio Channel Islands there, and I think that's been a really good thing for that school, and it's brought some economics. And my whole thing was kind of bringing more economics down to that part of the boulevard and the whole boulevard in itself. And that's why we decided 20 years ago to start redeveloping the boulevard to try to get, more economics down to that areas of the city. We really tried to get a usage of the old courthouse. We came very close with BCTC, but when they started crunching all the numbers, as Wood said, it kind of always gets down to the dollars and cents of an issue. A lot of times it does. It would be very, very expensive to try to rehab that building. And I'm looking for more of an active usage there to get people down there, more of a gathering place, if you will, and a passive park where you perhaps have some benches and some really nice hardscapes there. I mean, there's a lot of restaurants down there, so what most people, at least I, after I have a big meal, I like to go walk. So if we had something that's really advantageous there, that it's really inviting to the public, perhaps after they get out of eating the restaurants there, they could go to that area and maybe sit down and relax a little bit and kind of discover the whole part of that part of the boulevard there, which has a lot of potential. That part of the boulevard, I think, has a lot of potential. It's been underutilized because of what's been there for, decades. So I think this is our opportunity to really look at another usage of that could bring people down, could be really inviting, really pedestrian-friendly there. And used. We want to, obviously, we all want to keep the farmers market there, and there was some suggestions about expanding that, and perhaps that could be an area where we could expand the farmers market. I think it's always, somewhat easier to keep what you already have, and you already know it works, and that's the farmers market. That's a proven commodity down there. So if we could do something to really try to expand that. I was up at San Luis Obispo, and they have a thriving farmers market. They actually do it on Thursday night. It's really very thriving down there. As far as the parking there, perhaps we could restripe it and see if we can add some more spaces down there so people can park their car there. And I think, like was brought up too, the boulevard isn't that expansive where you can't walk it. You can still walk it fairly well. And I think, this area has a lot of potential. I think we focus on what we want to do at the courthouse, and we kind of do the school and kind of address that, at a future, time. But this is a time, I think, for us to really give staff some directions on what we want to do at the courthouse and the parking there. And my thinking is that we move past the courthouse and we do like some sort of a passive recreation use that people can have picnics down there on Sundays and Saturdays and at night. There's a lot of people that live down there that get out and walk. They walk their dogs, and it's a real great little community down there. So this will give them a gathering place. So those are my ideas on it.
Could I ask you the same question I asked Susan? Just to be clear, are you talking about going back into the grassy area that the school district owns or not?
No.
Thank you.
No. I'm only focused on what we own, and that could be a discussion for a way later date, what that could do. So,
Ask a question.
oh, Sean, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have one or two questions of staff because it's being brought up. From the backside of the courthouse back towards the lot that PBS, how much of the land do we own behind the courthouse? Like the row of trees, is that on our property or is that courthouse, or PVSD property?
Yeah, they're ours. It's right along the property line.
All right, so our property line is just past the row of mature trees?
No, I don't believe that's correct.
The trees,
There's only 5 feet or so, 5 to 7 feet from the back of the structure to the fence line, and that's our property line. The trees are on the PVSD property.
The chain link
Got it, yeah.
fence is our property line.
Yeah.
Okay. That big, I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench into just everything we've just talked about at this point. Because I know that my suggestion, the one thing I feel bad about is that what I'm suggesting, I feel like doesn't do enough to help the economic vitality of Old Town. I keep looking at that picture. I keep seeing that big, expansive plot of grass. I'm not saying that we dump a lot of money into it. Obviously, I'm going to stick with that. My feelings that I don't want to pour a lot of money into something we don't own. But I always go back to soccer and training space for soccer teams. And I know, talking to a few people with Park and Rec, not extensively, but I know that's always it's always needed. And boy, if some soccer teams could go and still practice on that field, if somehow they'd still have access, they'd park in that parking lot, practice on that field, and afterwards go down to Boulevard Burger or Mr. Softy and, get dessert or dinner with the family, as they would do once a week, as I did growing up as a kid playing AYSO soccer. I feel like that would be great if that were an opportunity for them.
Maybe.
What role we?
Rec and Park
Yeah,
is
no,
something
I was going to say I don't know what role the city necessarily plays in that, but I just see that as an opportunity. I don't know if that's ever been broached with PVSD and or Rec and Park, or there's some sort of opportunity there outside necessarily the scope of this project. I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
No, it's been a long time ago, years ago. As a matter of fact, I had a current conversation about that. Perhaps the soccer, they're always looking for, practice facilities there. So that could definitely be something. Keep in mind, you've got a neighborhood there, but that is an asset. That is a resource. Yes. And I do want to see if we could keep, the trees, obviously, and some greenery, because that's part of the inviting, nature of that area as well. So, Joe, do you have anything else that you want to talk to us about or anything, staff? And you want to speak? I think we have
I think we've already made our comments.
well, let her speak. She made yes.
I'm Phyllis Anderson. I live in Old Town. Are you saying you're going to tear down the courthouse or leave it?
Tear it down.
Maybe tearing down. Yeah.
You're going to tear it down.
Mm-hmm.
It's my understanding that when you build a courthouse, it's supposed to last 100, 150 years. So it's going to take a lot to tear it down, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to.
I mean, a lot of money, and dump all this concrete somewhere. And I just don't know why we can't figure a way to utilize it, is my question. And I thank you for that, Mayor.
Thank you.
I'll ask a question of staff because I know, I know a lot of members of the public have not had an opportunity to walk through the courthouse as of late or get an update as to maybe the structural integrity there or the issues in rehabbing it. Can I ask staff to, Joe, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but to whatever you know offhand about the current state of that building and why we would be looking at tearing it down as opposed to rehabbing it?
Yes. The courthouse, let's go back to where VCTC was in taking over the property and rehabbing it. They were going to convert that building into offices. Currently, right now, it's kind of a honeycomb of a lot of different offices, former hearing rooms, different classrooms, things like that. And then at one point, of course, it was used by city staff as adjunct offices in the heyday of redevelopment. We had different departments in there. The infrastructure is old. It's deteriorating. VCTC was basically going to gut the building and turn it into their offices at a cost of over $3 million. The HVAC system is gone. I mean, it would have to be totally ripped out and torn out. The building itself, as you see it now without any windows, is basically the state that it would have to be left in. You can't cut holes in that concrete. The lateral stability of the building in terms of seismic has been called into question in the last architectural assessment. Yes, it's going to be expensive to tear down the building and regrade the site. Remember, the building's at a much higher elevation than the rest of the site. And that's all known. And those are things that we're prepared for. Making the transition in grade to where the trees are, that's something, that's a design element that Mr. Goodale is going to have to work out and be useful for us. So there are some interesting things about that, but the building itself is functionally obsolete.
And you might add, too, my understanding, too, the cement and whatnot, it's much of that can be recycled if it's feasible to recycle the cement. I know they have to do some analysis on it and what's in the cement and whatnot.
Right, that would be up to the demolition contractor.
Yeah.
And they actually have to recycle a certain component as part of building code requirements.
So,
You asked a question if staff wanted to provide any additional input at this time, and I just want to share that the original proposal called for 4 alternative design concepts for the courthouse and PVSD property, and then 2 alternative design concepts for Disdar Park. And the reason that the scope of work originally anticipated 4 design alternatives for the courthouse is because we anticipated 2 for the courthouse property and parking, and then 2 alternative design concepts for the Pleasant Valley School District grass field area. And it sounds like there's pretty clear direction that you really don't want to see any design concepts for the Pleasant Valley School District area, and we want to make sure that's the majority input from the council at this point.
I believe that is that. Now, do you have enough direction?
The mayor, I noticed that the speaker put a slip in, I think, in the speaker box.
So yes, it sounds like there's concurrence that we're not going to be providing design concepts for the Pleasant Valley School District. Is that what I'm getting from the council?
Right.
Right.
I ask one question in relation to that. Has city staff, as part of this process, city staff was going to sit down with representatives from PVSD. Has that meeting already occurred or not?
So we had preliminary meetings, and actually in the scope of work in our adopted agreement with David Goodale, that was going to be the subsequent step following the council input.
Okay.
So we may meet with them just to tell them that we're not really interested in pursuing any opportunities there at this time, is what the direction I'm getting.
Joe, I have a question. I think I have the answer. Who owns the building between the courthouse and the Blackboard Gallery? I believe that's the school district?
Yes, that's correct.
School district. Okay. All right, so you have enough direction then on that?